Hello students, this is the lesson for chapter 6 in your secondary history, and in this chapter we're going to focus more on why did Japan wage a war in the Asia Pacific. So it's a little bit similar to chapter 4 when we learn why did war break out in Europe, why did Germany wage a war. So we are looking at different country and different region, but there will be a bit of overlap in some of the factors. Okay, and in today, okay, I'll be covering the 5 reasons mainly. These 5 reasons, you can find them in your textbook, in your notes as well. So have them with you as you're watching this. Okay, and these 5 reasons, although they are listed as 5 reasons here, there are a bit of overlap with each other. Later, I will explain a little bit more as I go through. And okay, and you can categorize the factors into various ways. So for example, there are longer term factors. That means things that have been happening for a longer period of time that may explain why Japan acted the way they did. And there could also things like short-term factors, which are things that happen more recent, that can help you to explain why Japan chose to take the certain step. You will see one of the last steps that happened here is attack on Pearl Harbor, so the immediate thing before America joined the war to fight Japan. Okay. All right, so I'll start with a bit of background information. Apologies. Okay, so Japan. Okay, so what is this background information? It's just to give you a bit of understanding on what is Japan's attitude towards other country. How has their relationship with other countries been like? Because unlike the previous part on Germany, where you learn about how Germany came to power under the Hitler, you all haven't had the exposure in Japan. So I'm just going to briefly introduce you. So Japan, before the period in the 1603 in the past few hundred years, before the war, it has been ruled by a shogunate. A shogunate is basically like a kingdom that is basically ruled by this guy, a shogun, which is like the strongest general sort of, or a lord, if you can think of it that way. So, but more importantly, Japan was largely isolated. That means they did not trade very much with other countries. They did not allow Japanese to maybe leave the country very much. They did not allow people to come to Japan very much. So Japan was very closed off, very, very traditional. Okay, because they thought, their culture is good enough, we can keep it that way. Okay, and some things you might already learn about Japan. They are in the past, there are people like the samurai, they are warriors, and they have a certain way of thinking. The thing that you might want to know is this thing called the Bushido, the way of the samurai. So the samurai, they are very warrior-like people. They are very fearsome, and they do not like to back down. They do not like to surrender. And you can perhaps even to think maybe perhaps they like to fight. Perhaps they are quite open to violence, waging war. So although the period we are studying in the 20th century is many years after the samurai kind of died down, the culture kind of died, the actual samurai actually died and passed on. Some of their spirit, this warrior spirit, carry on into the modern day and may start to help us understand why some of the Japanese people, they are so keen to go to war on. They are not afraid of war. Okay. So yeah, some Japanese words. Okay, so one of the very important turning point was this arrival of this guy called Commodore Perry. So Commodore Perry is an American, and when basically just now I said Japan was very closed off, very isolated, so they did not allow people to come to Japan pretty much. But this guy Perry, you can see he was very far ahead of his time. Japan was very traditional. Meanwhile, the rest of the world has started to modernize. So when the Americans came knocking on Japan's door, Japan suddenly realized, I can't really keep this guy out. He's too strong. Look at his boat. They have all these cannons. Meanwhile, I'm still fighting with swords over here. All right. So Japan started to realize, it was very shocked. It was a very rude awakening, and Japan decided, I need to very modernize very quickly so that I can protect myself and prevent myself from becoming colonized by these Western powers. If you know your lower sec history, you know that the Europeans have colonized many parts of the world, in Singapore, in Malaya, colonized by Britain, and so on. So Japan wanted to avoid the fate of many Asian countries. So they wanted to modernize, become very strong so that they can stand up to the Western colonial powers. All right. So they usually call this the black ships, because when they came here, you know, the Japanese, maybe they thought, okay, I never seen such big black steel ships with cannons before, so they were very shocked by it. Okay, so you can see the disparity, the modern ships compared to the very traditional Japanese scene you can see in the picture. Okay, and just a few more pictures. So when the Japanese decided they need to modernize, they also decided, okay, I will get rid of the shogun, and they decided to put the emperor back to power. So back then there's always been an emperor, but the shogun was the one with the real power, with the military power. So after they got rid of the shogun, they decided to make the emperor the man at the top with actual power. And they, through this new system, they also decided, okay, I will, under the leadership of the emperor, try and modernize and also industrialize Japan. So some of the words like industrialize, you know what it means. It means to build up the strength of the country, to build out your industry, to build out your factories. Okay, and to importantly also strengthen your military and to strengthen your economy, because both will keep your country safe and keep your country very strong. Okay, and the military in the past, they are samurai. They also realize we can keep the samurai spirit, but we need to fight with modern weapons, and we need to fight the modern way. Okay. All right. So the Japanese people, okay, they decided to rally under the emperor. Okay, they were also very open to a strong military due to their experience being led under the samurai in a long time. And all this will start to help us understand what is the mindset of the Japanese. Why, when they are threatened with war, why are they not afraid to fight back? Okay, we learned in the previous chapters, when Germany went on a rampage in Europe, a lot of the other countries like Britain, they decided to appease Germany because they think that will make them happy, and maybe they were not very keen to fight because of all sorts of economic reasons and so on. But we start to understand Japan with this military culture. They are not shy to fight. Okay, this is the rough mindset. Of course, there are people in Japan who are still not keen to fight, but we are painting a broad picture over here. Okay. Okay, so let's look at the 5 detailed reasons why did Japan decided to wage war in World War II. Okay, so you need to explain what are the reasons, and these are some of the reasons. I'll go through each in turn. Okay, same thing. There are external and internal factors, long-term and short-term factors. Okay, first reason we're going to look at the first reason that Japan really waged a war and wanted to start a war is because Japan is keen to start a war. That's why we talk about ambition. Japan has a desire to become the #1 power in Asia. And to become #1 power in Asia, you have to get powerful. You have to be able to prove that you can defeat others and rule over them. That's how you become #1. Okay, and Japan, you can see Japan has this very great ambition through these conflicts with countries like Russia, Britain, China. Okay, and later you will see how USA also provoke Japan and remind Japan that they really need to get stronger, because USA was the preeminent power then, was the strongest power. They also reminded Japan that Japan need to get stronger, or else they will never amount to anything much. Okay, so let's look at the first conflict with Russia. So in Russia, the main thing you need to know is, you can see that Japan over here, its immediate neighbors are the Soviet Union or Russia, as well as the next big country is China. These were the traditional sort of enemies of Japan. Okay, there is also Korea, but Korea is a very small country, so Japan has never really been afraid of Korea. So Japan, first and foremost, around the late 19th century, they saw that Soviet Union, the Russians, were a big security threat. Okay, because you know, if let's say I'm Japan, I want to invade China, I can never invade China in peace if I know that there's always a threat that the Soviet Union may attack me back. Okay, the Soviet Union may attack me in my back door. So Soviet Union has always been a traditional enemy with the Japanese. So the Japanese decided, rather than have the Soviet Union at the doorstep to Japan here, I need to basically push my border further in. I need to create some sort of buffer zone so that my Japanese mainland is kind of safer from the Soviet Union border. So the key to this is they decided to occupy this territory. Okay, I know I colored it over, called Manchuria. Okay, which is part of China. They decided we need a buffer zone. So they decided they need to make plans to take over Manchuria as well as Korea over here. Okay. Now, okay, so when the Japanese wanted to ask the Russians, can they, do their thing in Manchuria? Can they take over Manchuria? Russia first and foremost rejected Japanese offer because they think Japan is an Asian country. I'm Russian, I'm Westerner, I'm more superior than you. So they rejected Japan. They refused to give Japan any chance to get involved in Manchuria and do their business and even to try and colonize Manchuria. So Russia rejected them. So how did Japanese react? Knowing their warrior-like culture, they decided to fight. So the Russo-Japanese War broke out. Russo refers to the Russian. Okay, so Japanese War broke out in 1904, and it resulted in the Russians losing. Okay, so the Japanese defeated the Russians, and they signed a treaty with the Russians, and through this treaty, the Russians basically allowed the Japanese to build this railway in Manchuria. Okay, and they also gave the Japanese some islands. Okay, and this is a very important in starting to help us understand why Japanese eventually will wage World War II, because this is the first time they fought a major war, the first time they fought a war with a Western power, and they managed to defeat a modern country like Russia, and it gave the Japanese a great deal of confidence. It gave them a great deal of respect. So the Japanese people started to respect the people who rule Japan. They think that Japan is really on to doing very great things. And you can imagine this will only give Japan the confidence to do more and try their luck with other countries and fight other countries. Okay, so this is a very big turning point, their confidence defeating a European Western power. Okay, the other thing that gave Japan a lot of ambition to become the number one in Asia was because of another alliance with Britain. So this is not a war here, but Britain one day, 1902, decided to sign this alliance with Japan. And in this alliance, all you need to know is that Britain basically recognized Japan. So Britain said, okay, I think you are quite a strong country. You just defeated Russia. I'll recognize you. I give you the right to, defend Korea. While Japan recognized Britain's right to defend India. Basically, at that point, Japan has taken over Korea, Britain has taken over India, but basically they both praise each other and say, "Wow, you are quite strong. You are also, we both of us are quite strong." And basically, this gave Japan confidence because they are recognized by a very strong country like Britain as being something of an equal. Okay, that's why they signed an alliance. Okay, so same thing, it also gave Japan a lot of respect. Okay, and with this respect, you can only ask yourself, how will this lead to more war in the future? Okay, if Japan starts to feel very proud, very strong of itself, it might be tempted to fight other countries to assert its dominance. Okay, so they were given sort of equal status, and they were recognized as an imperial power. And imperial power, usually what we mean is, besides the fact that it's an empire, it also means that you are starting to become like you are probably going to start acting like a colonial master, which means you are going to start conquering countries as your own, just like Britain has done for hundreds of years. Okay. Third thing that shows Japan's ambition was through their fighting with China. So China, being the neighbor of Japan, has always been a traditional enemy. So the first thing that shows Japan's ambition is they started this war called the Sino-Japanese War. Okay, Sino refers to China, Japanese refers to Japan, of course. So these two countries, they fought, and Japan defeated China, and from this war, they gained control of Korea and gained control of Taiwan. Korea wasn't really part of China, but Korea was like the little brother to China, basically. So when they lost the war, China basically lost this Korea influence, and Korea have to adopt a new big brother, which is Japan. So Korea became sort of friends with Japan for a while, and eventually after Japan took over Korea wholesale. Okay, so these two territories were the first. It also gave Japan a lot of confidence, and also shows Japan is able to defeat a big country and get more territories. Okay, so they took over Taiwan and Korea and started to become a colonial power. Okay, and from this invasion, you can only imagine what does this do to Japan. Japan will become stronger also, because when you gain country, right, you also gain more strength. You also gain more resources. So in Korea and Taiwan, you have resources to be used. It's also good for economy because these people now under you, they are at your bidding. They also may buy Japanese goods. So it's very good for your business. So a lot of Japanese commoners, although they didn't fight the war, they may support the war, because when you take over new territories, you can start forcefully selling you get more customers, basically, because all these people that are not under your country can now buy your things very easily. Okay. So you can see Japan over here is seated with the other Western powers, carving out China over here. So Japan, basically, you can see its ambition to become the same as the Western power, to become a colonial power. Okay, so we see their growing ambition and aggression through the conflicts with China. There are a lot of details here, but basically you just need to know that through the Sino-Japanese War, China had to give up a lot of things like Korea and Taiwan, and Japan became more ambitious and more aggressive after that, because they know they can fight China and they can continue to fight China and take over more territories if they want to. Okay, so they signed, you might be asking, what is this 21 demands? This basically like a treaty that they signed with China, forcing China to give up a lot of things, their pride, territories. They might give up certain land in China for Japan to trade and do business, to build a base, so and so on. Okay, and okay, it will definitely also create a lot of tensions, because other European powers will start to notice this guy is very strong. He's taking away a lot of territories. They may one day be able to challenge us. Okay, so this is many years before World War II, but it starts to show how the relationship with Japan and other countries are becoming worse and worse, with more conflict and tension. All right. Okay, the next country we're going to look at is with the USA. So the USA, how does this tell us about Japan's ambition to become a very strong country? All you need to know, okay, is the Americans, they basically considered the Japanese as inferior. They discriminated the Japanese in a variety of ways. One of the ways is to prevent immigrants, including Japanese immigrants, from going to America. And the Japanese felt very insulted by America, and they are therefore very determined to prove that, okay, you look down on us, I'm going to show you I have substance, I have power, and you will never look down on me later. So it will also, it hurt Japan through this discrimination, but Japan will want to kind of prove the USA wrong by becoming stronger. And this was motivate to wage more war in the future. Okay, so a bit more details you can read by yourself, but basically they're discriminated, and Japanese will want to try and prove that it's an equal and stronger power. Okay, and besides the discrimination, the immigrants, there was another point where Japanese was kind of insulted, was because the USA decided, okay, at the Paris Peace Conference. Paris Peace Conference is when they signed the TOV, the Treaty of Versailles. They decided, you know, America shall not, okay, so Japanese at that conference basically say, I want to be treated as an equal. Can you put that in the document for me so that people will respect me? USA basically say, no, we don't want to treat Japan as equal. We don't want to recognize them in this document. So Japan also felt very unhappy from this point, want to become more ambitious and get stronger so that they will be respected by the other powers. Okay. Another thing that showed Japan being insulted. So we have a few examples, the immigrants being blocked. We got Paris Peace Conference, the equality clause being dropped. Okay, and we also got this thing called the Washington Naval Conference, which was supposed to reduce the navy of many countries, including Germany, but Japan was forced to reduce their strength more than the USA. So if you look at this slide, Japan was given allowed to have a much smaller navy compared to the other countries like Britain and USA. Okay, so they also felt very unfair, want to prove the European powers along that I'm a strong country and deserve more. Okay, all right, that was reason one. Okay, at any point in time, it's a big chapter. Any point in time, feel free to pause, take a break, and come back to view the rest of the video. Okay, reason two why Japan want to wage a war, besides wanting to prove itself and become the #1 country, is also because Japan was facing a lot of crises at home that made it had to go to war. Okay, so let's cover what are these 3 points that encourage Japan to fight a war. Okay, so these 3 reasons: economic, overpopulation, and growth of military influence. Okay, so Japan, in a nutshell, had a lot of population. Population was very big. There was not enough food. Traditional farming methods don't produce enough food. So people were very unhappy with the Japanese government. I need food. So what can the Japanese government do to get food? Besides, working our farmers harder, an easy way food will also be to maybe get it from other countries. If you don't want to buy it from other country, you've got to forcefully steal it and get it from country by conquering this country. So, okay, at the time, the situation was very worse. The economy was very bad because of one big event that we learned before called the Great Depression. Not only affected Germany, it affected many countries like Japan as well. And at that point, other countries like USA, Britain did this thing called protectionism. Basically, they don't trade with Japan because they don't want, let's say I'm USA government, I don't want my Americans to be buying Japanese goods when they can be supporting American business. Okay, so Japan lost customers, economy get affected as well. Okay, so Japan had a very big population. There was a lot of demand for housing and basic necessities. And to provide more resources and living space for Japan, it also means that I need an expansionist policy. Expansionist policy means you need to grow, you need to expand your territory. Okay, which means you need to fight some sort of war to acquire territory so they get more resources for the country and the citizens. Okay, so they thought, okay, I can occupy territories to get more living space resources. And the first one of the earlier examples, besides Korea, besides Taiwan, is the invasion of Manchuria in 1931. So this one is a bit more closer towards World War II. Okay, so Manchuria was seen as a lifeline because, like, acquiring colonies will give you resources, manpower, may give you precious materials, more importantly, food for Japanese to survive. Okay, and you also get market. That means Japanese businesses can now sell to more customers very easily. Okay, so if you look at some of these examples, Taiwan and Korea, which were then under Japan, they were able to supply Japan with all these important materials. And if they look further away, Southeast Asia, they will be able to get a magical thing called oil and many raw materials. So all these things will tempt Japan to basically say, come and invade us, come and grab this. This could all be yours. Okay, and later you will see why they eventually found it so tempting to do so. Okay, so the third thing that's happening in Japan, okay, that may explain why Japan wanted to go to war is because of this military influence in Japanese politics. Military influence, okay, basically it means the army and navy had a lot of power. Okay, so much power that even the prime minister can be assassinated by the generals. So if the generals think, I don't like the prime minister, I have guns, I can create all this assassination. So the army and navy basically were ruling Japan. We have the emperor at the top, and below the emperor, you have a prime minister. But the prime minister, right, may not always have the most power because the people with the real power, with the guns, are the army and navy. And these people, just now we mentioned, the samurai, they are not shy about fighting war. So This army and navy guys, they are also not shy about fighting a war. And with these guys in charge of the country, you can imagine why Japan in the end might decide to go and fight a war, because this is our job, this is what we do. So they might push Japan towards war more easily compared to, say, a country where the prime minister is not a general, or when the military is not so strong. Okay, so the military influence may push Japan to fight more. Okay, and they tend to support an aggressive foreign policy as a solution, because instead of just talking out and solve your problems, right, they'll say, let us do our job. We have the guns, we have the weapons, we can prove to be very useful, we can prove to be a very valuable asset to the Japanese empire. So these military people will naturally want to nudge the Japanese government to choose a path of war rather than, say, diplomacy, to talk it out. Okay. All right. Third reason why Japan, wanted to go to war was because, this is a bit of, you start to see a bit of overlap already. Because of this expansionist foreign policy. So what does the expansionist foreign policy basically? It basically means that Japan wanted to be an empire in the whole of East Asia. They wanted to create this thing called the Greater East Asia Pro-Prosperity Sphere. So what does this word mean? Greater East Asia obviously refers to the region, China, even includes Singapore. Okay, they want to create an empire of this country, and under this empire, they will say, okay, this is Asia, right? It should be ruled by Asian, in particular by Japan, and together we will prove to be very great. We'll become a very strong empire that can stand up against the West. Okay. So they wanted to create a very big empire, and one way to do it is to slowly create many states or countries. Satellite states are countries that will be very loyal to Japan. So there are two options. One way is for Japan to take over the country and rule the country directly. The other way is to create, install a government in the country. That means you make sure that the government in the country will be listening to Japan, be loyal to Japan all the time. And one way to do it is, Japan maybe can one day go to, say, Manchuria. Just now you mentioned Manchuria, right? Instead of ruling Manchuria directly, they can create a new, maybe a new ruler in Manchuria, and then this ruler can help Japan to run the country. But basically, will function like as if it's already under. Basically, it's like a colony. Okay, so they want to create this big empire where, Asia, we got all these very rich raw materials like rubber and oil. We want to put it all under one empire. So Japan had this dream to create this big East Asia empire. And since you dream of creating this empire, one way to achieve it is you have to wage war to take over these territories, or to create this dream happen. Okay. Reason for why Japan decided to wage a war, like why Germany decided to wage a war, is because the League of Nations was unable to stop Japan. Okay, so there are two incidents that will show you why Japan was unable to be stopped by the League. Okay, so two examples. Remember the League were very ineffective. Why were the League very ineffective? Because they have no weapons, no army of their own. They have no army. You can also know that the USA is not part of the League. So the League itself was very weak. This was what we learned in chapter 1, in case you have forgotten. So how did the League fail in Japan? So just now we mentioned Japan decided to take over Manchuria because they have a lot of good source of raw materials. Okay, but did the League stop Japan? They did try. Okay, so what happened? So Japan basically came out with an excuse in this incident called the Mukden incident. Basically, they planted a bomb, and when the bomb exploded, the Japanese said, "Oh, we are being attacked." Then they used that as excuse to send their troops into Manchuria, and once they sent the troops in, they never left. Okay, and they created a new country called Manchukuo. They took it away from China and created a new country that is loyal to Japan. Okay, so effectively controlled by Japan's military. So what did the League do? The league, China protested the league, asked the league for help, and they sent this guy called the Lord Lytton. Okay, if you forget the name, is okay. You just need to know that the League of Nations investigated. They found that Japan was guilty, was unfairly committing aggressive acts. Okay, and Japan, although say it was self-defense, they realized it's not true. So now that Japan is found to be in the wrong, what did Japan do? The Japan refused to do anything. Okay, remember the league had no army. It has no army. It only has its members. If the members don't want to send their army, the league really has nothing it can do. So the league basically condemned and scolded Japan. Okay, and Japan refused to budge. You scold me, I don't like you, I'll withdraw from the League of Nations. What can you do about it? I already took over this territory. Okay, what can you do about it? Okay, so the league did not apply collective security. Collective security, you can think about it as a fight back, to defend, okay, to defend the members like China. Okay, so the league failed to defend its members, including China, from aggressors like Japan, and Japan's aggression went unchecked. Now, if the league failed at this, why would this create more war in the future? There are a few ways you can understand it. First, it gave Japan a lot of confidence. Japan realized that, you know, if I can take over this country, maybe I can take over country B. And the league, same thing, will not be trying to stop me or unable to stop me. And second thing that helps Japan to reach more, once you take over more territory, once you have more territory, you have more power. Okay, and when you have these two things, confidence and power, you will perhaps want more war. You will be able to wage more war. Okay, so this is how you explain how the failure of the League of Nations can encourage Japan to fight more wars. Okay, just our first example was about Manchuria. Okay, so now we are looking at the second example, the Sino-Japanese War. Again, Sino refers to China. Okay, so they fought China in the 19th century once, so 20th century they fought again. Same excuse. They basically said there was an incident, okay, and they used the excuse to send troops into China. Okay, you don't need to know details. You just need to know that Japan came out with some excuse, attacked China. China asked the league for help. Again, the members of the league, including the Western powers who have the power, were not willing to help. They were very busy in Europe trying to watch out for Hitler. So again, the league did not come to save China. Japan got its way, gain confidence, gain power, will want to wage more war. Okay, so Japan became more confident. Okay, last but not least, Japan decided to wage a war, decided to fight the war, in particular America. Okay, it's because of a lot of a few world developments at that time. Okay, so just now we mentioned that these things have been happening for a long time. Economic crisis, overpopulation, the conflict with the various countries have been happening for a long time. But why did Japan suddenly decide to one day drop bombs on Pearl Harbor and to officially declare war on the US? Okay, so why did they suddenly decide to attack Singapore? Like what you learned in Sec 2. What was all these things give us the short-term factors, tells us about the timing. Why did Japan choose to wage a war then? So what was happening around the world then? Okay, so Japan had not been attacked, okay, had not been experiencing a lot of pushback from its action, okay, because the USA as well as the many other countries has been pursuing policy of isolationism. This is one of your blanks under world developments, which means that the Americans wanted to, how do I put it? They basically want to stay out. Okay, they don't want to get involved. Okay. However, okay, the US decide to pressure Japan, okay, because they know Japan was becoming a bit of a bully, were becoming very, very powerful. So when Japan started to attack China, the USA start to cancel treaties with Japan. they start to restrict Japanese trade. When Japan occupied more territories, they imposed more trade embargo. So embargo is basically a ban. So they decided to not sell important things like steel and oil to Japan, and to try and hinder Japanese war effort. Okay, so Japanese were being pressured by the Americans then. Okay, so when the US don't want to sell the oil, you have to find oil elsewhere. And one of the places with a lot of oil is in Southeast Asia, Brunei, in Malaysia, and so on. Okay, so although the US, okay, through this you can see that the US kind of pressure Japan to wage a bigger war in Southeast Asia, because if the USA was willing to sell oil, maybe Japan would be like very happy. Oh, okay, you know, if I get what I want, I don't need to fight other countries. But of course, you can argue the other way also. If the USA continue to sell oil and steel, it might encourage Japan to wage more war, because Japan have the ability to wage a war. Okay, so it works both ways. All right. So one reason why Japan, okay, suddenly decided to wage a war was because many of the territories, we wanted to attack Southeast Asia. Many of the territories in Southeast Asia were under the British, under the French, under the Dutch, and all these countries all fell to Hitler very quick. Not fell. They were very busy fighting Germany in World War II in Europe. Okay, so the defenses in Asia Pacific were very weak because the Europeans were very preoccupied with the war in Europe, and it provided Japan with the opportunity, okay, to send in their troops and have a very easy victory. Okay, so this will encourage Japan to start the war. And last but not least, the war finally broke out because of this trigger called the attack on Pearl Harbor, which because the Americans has been pressuring Japan, like I mentioned. Okay, so Japan feel like they need to fight back and teach Americans a lesson. And more importantly, before you can attack your Southeast Asia, one of the reasons is they also want to make sure the Americans are very weak and they will never interfere. Okay, so they decided to bomb Pearl Harbor, and war was declared between the US and Japan. And this is the official start of World War II. Okay. All right, so just a very quick timeline. Okay, they basically approve a plan. Japanese refused to negotiate, and eventually decided to try and do a knockout blow and attack. And then the USA ultimately declared war on Japan. Okay, so to end off this lesson, it's been really long. So this is an example of an 8-mark essay from that can be tested from this chapter. They may ask you explain 2 factors that contributed to the outbreak of World War II in Asia Pacific, and you might want to take maybe of the 5 factors, you can take 2 and explain them. Okay. They may also, for a 12-mark essay, usually they will give you a statement. Japan was forced to wage war in Asia Pacific. So maybe from the 5 factors, you must start to ask yourself, which one shows that Japan was forced? Which one shows that Japan was maybe not so forced? So, for example, I can explain that if I have an overpopulation, maybe Japan, I can say Japan was kind of forced because, you know, Japan had a lot of problems and war was a very necessary solution. Okay, maybe you can also explain that they were never forced. Okay, because this expansion is for this desire to gain more resources is optional. They were very greedy. They were not forced. They just wanted more power, just to feel better about themselves. So you can say maybe they are not forced. Okay, so there are many ways, and your teacher will go through the homework with you with this. Okay, so end off, you can test yourself. What would Japan gain from controlling the Asia Pacific region? What were the things that they can acquire from taking over these countries? Why was war seen as the best way? Why not try and talk? Okay, at what point did the USA and Japan's conflict became unavoidable? And you can start to also ask yourself, are there any similarities with why war broke out in Europe? So one of the main thing is you can ask yourself, what's the legal end? Okay. All right, that's all. For this lesson. I will see you in the next few videos. All right.